we are successful in everything that we do, and the entire world's global financial infrastructure is built on chain on Solana, it needs to be damn good. Every single person in the world is likely to have their first crypto transaction happen on a phone. And if meme coins are a thing that engage people, and that maybe is a way for capital formation to happen in some future, sure, absolutely, why not?
John, welcome. How are you doing, man?
Doing great.
Welcome to Real World Value Podcast, where we talk about the universal economy that's coming with RWAs and consumer dApps. So, welcome. John is head of engineering.
Yes,
head of engineering at Solana. I didn't want to butcher the title. So, head of engineering at Solana. And yeah, obviously a lot to talk about with all the progress Solana's making and everything going on at the ecosystem. To begin with... so many things we can talk about. So to begin, can we talk a little bit about what being head of engineering of something so big means?
Yep.
Because I reckon, there's quite a number of things that you're in charge of. Just give us some insights as to how your workload looks like, what your team looks like, and
sure,
I'll let you take it over.
Yeah, it's a great question. So thank you first for having me. It's wonderful to be here in Seoul. It's definitely going to be an interesting week.
Oh yeah, we're in Korea.
We're in Korea, yes. So I run the ecosystem engineering team at the Solana Foundation. And, these are useful distinctions. There are folks that are working really hard on building the protocol that is Solana and the thing that powers the Solana network at Onza and Jump, Jito, a handful of other teams. And that's what I would consider more hardcore engineering. They're coding day to day. My team is actually a little bit above that. So in terms of, the layering, I think of it like, the network at the bottom layers maybe overloaded, but in the middle is sort of the technology platform. And then at the top is the economy, right? What's happening on chain in the markets, that sort of stuff. And our focus is really on that technology platform component, and what we are doing and spend most of our time doing is working with teams, small and large, to understand what their product is, what their businesses are, and how blockchain fits or doesn't fit in what they're doing. So give you a concrete example, a team like Stripe or Visa says, hey, we want to do something on chain. Well, fantastic. We have a great chain for you. It's called Solana. Here's how it works. Here's sort of how you can scope the kinds of things that you can build on it. And here's where it's going to make sense for you. Here's what's not going to make sense for you. Here's how you can size it, right? So in the process of doing that, we work with 10, 20, 100 teams of varying different sizes, whether they're small startups or large enterprises, and we try and understand where are the common friction points or where are the things that people don't understand. Are there standards that we need to develop? Are there new things that we need to introduce to the ecosystem and make sure that they proliferate? Or are there things that are just plain bad? So we spend a lot of time working with those teams. So it is engineering. It's just a little bit different than building the actual protocol that is Solana.
And this is actually one thing I wanted to ask you at the very beginning of the podcast. So it's good that you're bringing it up right now. When you talk to a big name like, let's say, Visa, because obviously you're in charge of this ecosystem getting adoption, and you guys, of course, are right now, I think, number one in crypto when it comes to getting adoption from all areas, and also getting dApps that are actually sticky. When someone like Visa comes to you, what's their journey like? How do you onboard them, and what do you have to tell them? Usually, how advanced are they in their knowledge, pre-existing knowledge of everything that you guys are doing?
Sure. Yeah, so I'll answer sort of generically. I think there's a whole host of companies that are in this boat, but I think by and large, most companies are fairly new to blockchain, right?
Yeah.
So maybe they run validators, maybe they are sort of dabbling their toes, but they don't fully understand it, right? And part of it has to do with the history of blockchain. Part of it has to do with just the bureaucracy at these organizations. But, most companies, if they are coming to Solana or trying to work out new blockchain products, typically start from Ethereum. And the problem with that is it's good and bad, right? I think philosophically it's great. You want to be in a place where people understand the value of public permissionless chains. The problem is when you see a square hole, you're going to build a square block, right? And I think in this case, what happens a lot is people typically maybe overcompensate their product for what Ethereum is capable of doing. And so a lot of our initial conversations with these companies are, hey, I'm fantastic that you know and understand Ethereum. Here's how the things that you need to unlearn, because this is how Solana works. And it addresses a whole host of problems that Ethereum and Bitcoin and other blockchains have had in the past, and we solve it at scale, right? And so you have to think about things just a little bit differently.
Is it mainly scalability when you talk about that, or what other things are you requesting them to unlearn?
Yeah, I think part of it is a mental model in terms of shifting your mindset from a world where, hey, I can totally internalize even $1 worth of gas fees or $15 or $50 worth of gas fees. In that world where you can internalize that cost as a business, the kind of product you're building is very different. Like imagine if you had to spend $5 to get on the bus, how differently that would change how you approach getting around the city, right? But when it's cheap or fast or whatever it is, that fundamentally changes how people get around, how the city itself gets laid out. So I think part of it is, we have to start at the very top part of it of like, hey, this is what accessibility is. This is what scalability is. They've, a lot of folks coming from Ethereum have never seen a blockchain that works this fast and works this well, right, over time. So we need to start from that level of like, okay, let's shift your mindset a little bit. Then let's figure out what is the same, right? So tokens are the same, except on Solana, you don't have to build your own custom smart contracts. You can use your own, reuse an existing smart contract that's off the shelf. So basically now you're unlearning what things you customize and what things you can pull off the shelf. And all that translates to ultimately what it's going to take for your business to get on chain.
And what's like the most advanced version of that? Like when they have learned the basics and they are already integrating and launching on Solana, like what are you hoping for them to do? What are you trying to get them to do, especially right now? Because obviously, I reckon you guys are a bit past the point where just any adoption is good enough, and you might be working on more complex or on more interesting use cases.
Yeah, I think, it depends on the product, depends on the business. For the vast majority of businesses, honestly, the first step of just taking in stablecoin payments is as far as they need to get. But at this point, when, I'm based in New York City, there's so many financial institutions, fintechs, enterprises. Every single company in the entire world probably needs to be internalizing what it means to accept a stablecoin, right? I'll give you a concrete example. Here in Seoul, if you try and take public transit, you have to get a T-Money card. Cool. Works really well if you have a Korean debit card or Korean bank account. You cannot...
And cash.
You need cash, yes. And how do you get cash? You need to have a debit card. There's a whole host of things here where you could solve that easily with a stablecoin transfer, right? That alone could fundamentally change how people get around the city, right? And instead of taking Ubers everywhere, you start taking buses and subways and take advantage of a lot of the transit. So I'm speaking from personal pain because I've dealt with this multiple times.
Yeah, I feel personally targeted with this example.
Yeah, I mean, the cash part, yeah, it's great. Like, that can all be figured out. But even that, just at the minimum, saves a lot of money in terms of processing, but it also just changes how you think about your business, right? So I think for a lot of these enterprises, just that first level of stablecoin ins, outs, accounting, replacing your back of house could actually fundamentally change how we see the world. And that's enough, right? Then there is, I think the last 10 to 20% of companies that are doing fundamentally more interesting things. So whether it's smart contracts with programmable payments or tokenized securities, other kinds of financial instruments, being able to handle that around the world at the speed of light, all of that is also quite interesting as well. But it really depends on the business, right? But at minimum, stablecoins are the first step for everybody and might be the last stop for a lot of folks.
And I think there's a little bit of a fundamental change going on when it comes to this stablecoin adoption. You see more platforms like even projects in your ecosystem like Pump.Fun and outside of your ecosystem like Hyperliquid. A lot of them are more like stablecoin native and everything is denominated and happens in stablecoins. And to me, that's a very big and impactful change. That's for the better of the ecosystem because so much of the accounting happening on unstable coins, it was just too much for the average person to wrap their head around. And yeah, before we go into RWAs and so on, since we're talking about these apps and stablecoin adoption, what do you credit when it comes to Solana's stickiness and your dApps ecosystem stickiness? What do you credit the blockchain for or your team for that normally doesn't get talked about as much?
Yeah, it's a good question. I definitely, well, my team is definitely working in behind the scenes. It's really about the ecosystem of founders and startups and companies that are all making a bet that, hey, we should share this information. We should work in the same system. Is just a philosophical shift that a lot of folks are taking a risk on, right? So they're really the ones that are putting their own sort of energy and effort out there, and I think part of it has to do with Solana's technology. When you have a system that is able to clear a transfer at, the median transaction fee is 0.001 cent. That 0.001 cent gets you basically anything around the world at the speed of light. That, again, fundamentally changes the kinds of products you can build. So I think it's less about the stickiness of the technology in the network, and it's more around, can you build a great product? Because that's all that really matters. Like, I actually would be totally fine if the best, most successful applications in the world were powered by Solana and they said nothing about it. That's the point, right?
Yeah.
Like, it shouldn't be a thing that locks you in. And the reality is that the vast majority of people do not care. They do not care what chain you're doing. You don't care what coin it is. If they spend the most of their time thinking about getting paid in Korean won and they need to be able to spend Korean won, guess what you need? A Korean won stablecoin. But that connects all the different pieces. So I think like it really is about what technology helps you solve the problem the best. And that right now is Solana. And part of that has to do with the market, part of that has to do with the technology. But ultimately, yeah, like most of these apps, doesn't even matter that it's on Solana.
That's one thing I think, like, for our team working in chain abstraction, it's been quite the hurdle when we talk to projects and we realize that mindset wise they're so established in their base chain. So they, I don't know, they launch on Polygon, they launch on Berachain, they launch on whatever, Avalanche, and they only fundamentally see themselves as being a part of this mini ecosystem. But we tell them, hey, you can get users from Solana, you can get users from Ethereum, you can get users from Arbitrum. And a lot of them are honestly blocked towards it. Like, they don't even want to take the challenge of going and competing into a bigger ecosystem. And I think that's something that will have to change over the next year, over the next couple of years. Particularly because obviously the most successful apps are all in Solana, and if you're building outside of that ecosystem, you're isolating yourself from it.
I think the complex thing here is, and what you're really tapping into is what aspects of blockchain ecosystems lead or contribute to the success of an application. And for a lot of applications, it's distribution, right? It's having someone else that is advertising the things that you're building, right?
Yeah.
And when you're a big fish in a small pond, then yeah, of course, like the foundation like amplifies you. The marketing engine is helping you, because guess what? Most teams are 2 to 10 people, and so you need all the help that you can get. That's fantastic, right? If people are willing to pay you to be on that network, do it. Take more money. Ask for more, right? That the whole point is to build a successful business, right? Now, success is important. It's not just about how much money you get to be in a place. It's, are you making more money from the business and the product that you're building, or are you making more money from a grant or something else? That's when things get a little bit weird, right? So I completely agree with you. I think that more applications should be considering paying on any chain, right? Why? Who cares what chain USDC is on? Just accept it. And it'll ultimately settle in whatever chain makes the most sense for you in your back of house, for your accounting purposes, for the kinds of things that you want to do. And if you want to take USDC from Arbitrum and settle it on Solana, and because Solana has different capabilities for you, great, right? If you want to do the opposite, great. The point is build a great product and business. That's the only thing that matters. But yeah, a lot of people get kind of closed off because they see their success as the number of tweets that they get from their ecosystem, and so.
It's very hard not to think like that. Also, like to their credit, or yeah, to forgive them a little bit for it. Yeah, like
Sure.
it's very weird in crypto when you're in a marketing team. Like interpreting the noise that's going on and interpreting the noise that you yourself purposefully create.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these teams are also like running airdrop campaign over airdrop campaign, and of course they're getting a lot of tweets, but then they have to discern what the signal is and what it's like that they're paying for that goes into nothingness.
Yep. Yeah, and this is the thing that I try and urge many teams to understand is like, yeah, if there's an airdrop campaign, people are roughly being paid to engage, right? And you've reversed what you want. Like people in general want to feel the opposite, that you engage and you're part of a community, and that community ultimately yields ownership in that community and decision making. But more often than not, it's the opposite. People are there because they know that they're going to get paid to do it. Therefore, they're going to do whatever it takes to follow the rules. And so, I spent a lot of time working with founders to be like, look, you guys got to be really careful about seeing any signal at all in all of this, right? And the other part of it is like, who are you advertising to? If you are strictly a crypto protocol in the sense that you are focused on other crypto participants being your customers, then yeah, it makes sense to be yapping on X or whatever it is, because that's your demographic. That's how you connect with them. If you're trying to win and fundamentally change financial infrastructure for like the entire world, your audience is somewhere else, right? They might be on LinkedIn. They might be, whatever, at a conference or something like that. And again, those people are going to have a very different approach to getting information.
And when it comes to your own building, when it comes to how you, because obviously you work quite closely with founders, but within your team, what metrics do you look at? Like, how do you try to understand the signal out there? Is it purely by number of applications launched? Is it purely by interactions, volume, and so on? Or what do you think you focus on that other teams don't, or that would be good for people to know that you do?
Yeah, this one's a harder one to measure ultimately. I think in part because if you consider the foundation at some sort of a reasonable comparison might be the government of a city or a country. So what ultimately is the success metric for any country, right? Is there a success metric at all, right? Is it the happiness of the citizens? Is it the GDP? Is it the, et cetera, et cetera? So, we don't have those kinds of metrics. If we did, it would be really indirect proxies. The way that I think about where our success is or lies, or the things that we can be happy about, is definitely companies being successful. That's the most important thing. But not every company can be successful. There's a lot of reasons why a company just does not work. And it could be founders, it could be the market, it could be a whole host of things that happen all the time. So we do have to spend a lot of time thinking about, okay, what's the broad sort of market of possible things? Are people with good ideas able to at least get the chance to sort of like compete? And if that's the case, then that's our job, right? But yeah, I think it's a tough one because, yeah, like I said, there's so many extenuating circumstances that could occur that mean that someone is or isn't successful. But ultimately, that's what startups are about, right? You learn what does and doesn't work as a founder, as a business, and you pivot, right? You learn something new and try something else, right? So, one of the things that I really like about the Solana ecosystem is that you'll see repeat founders that keep coming back to Solana, right? They understand, one, their network, but also that there's something interesting there that's good enough to build a business. And even if they don't succeed, they will continue trying. And then they find something that succeeds. And I think that's the whole point. You're supposed to fail fast. You're supposed to learn things and move quickly.
What would you say that is? What would you say they're seeing that makes them want to keep coming back?
I mean, I do think that the technology shapes how people are sort of attracted to it. So I'll give you a concrete example. Communities seem to follow the things that are given to them. Let me try and find a good analogy for this, but maybe I'll give you the converse. I think in sort of the Ethereum ecosystem, what you find is the fragmentation of things like L2s.
Yeah.
Regardless of what you think about the technological trade-offs that are associated with it, the thing that is the most detrimental impact for the entire community is the fact that you have fragmented the people. You have fragmented their mind share in all of these different places for
And their
no
user experience.
Exactly, for no particularly good reason. The technical trade-offs that are provided by any of these L2s are not worth fragmenting the people that are around it. We're too early to be able to think about, hey, we need to all be in these different factions. These L2s are doing these things to each other. Like, no one cares, right? Like, we still have not been successful at any meaningful like measure, right? So when I think about Solana, it's about the fact that everyone is in the same place.
And quite literally, to interrupt you, one very good thing I've heard about the Solana community is that people say, like, I go to an event like Korea Blockchain Week, and there's 1 trillion side events happening all the time, and I have to hop from one to another. And although that happens to a small degree in the Solana community, when you do throw a big conference, like, people are there. People are not trying to go away. So that does give you an idea of which ecosystem is more cohesive and which one has people more working towards the same goal.
Yeah, I mean, I had the sort of honor of organizing the Accelerate conference in New York earlier this year. And that was one of the biggest pieces of feedback where people who had been to previous events, crypto events, were basically like, this is the best one I've ever been to because of that fact. Everyone wanted to come to the conference. And that's such a strange thing. Like, coming to, like, I think about Token or Korea Blockchain Week, and I'm like, is anyone actually going to the actual events? And it's unclear to me, right? It's never 100% yes, right? And I think that is it's good that everyone is able to come and enjoy Sol and, like, build a community, but it's messy. And I think the underlying loss that you get is you lose the ability to get good ideas, right? Because good ideas come from connecting the right people at the right times.
Totally agree. I think, again, with working in chain abstraction, one thing that we pay a lot of attention to is this fragmentation. And as I said before, a lot of times it's a mindset that projects themselves have that limits them, even though it doesn't need to. Yeah. But a lot of time, there's just an unfortunate reality. Like, in some ecosystems are dying, some ecosystems are growing. It's hard for them to choose where to launch, and that determines a lot of things. In Solana, you simply don't have that. So it makes life a lot easier. And actually, again, we talked about this before in this conversation. You guys have quite a sticky number of applications that people are coming back to that, to mention Pump That Fun again, you see them like, the token is going up, the token is going down, it's going up, whatever, but it's always in the news, it's always in the mind share, and it's like, everyone knows what it is for, and everyone knows to go there when they want to do that specific thing. And I think in every cycle, there's always a mini cycle of quote unquote nonsense. Like, it's been NFTs, it's been crypto pets, whatever. You see that, and for this cycle it was meme coins, and obviously that happened to a large degree in Solana. And these things are very good actually for the ecosystem because they help bring retail to crypto. They help drive the attention into crypto, which is obviously something we need. How do you guys understand the role of these type of things within your ecosystem and in breaking away from the Web3 eco bubble?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think part of it's twofold. One is that culture, society, as we see it today, is growing into the internet, right? So I think Gen Z is very big on this. I'm not part of Gen Z, but I think a big piece of it is that they're just chronically online, right? And
the world.
The entire world is like this. And what I think we haven't done as a society, as sort of humans, have really stopped to consider whether or not that's a good thing. I mean, you see it here. Everyone's just buried in their phones all the time, right?
Every single coffee shop, everyone's buried in their phones.
Yes, yeah. People are increasingly lonely, and they don't spend as much time doing the things that used to be something that would engage you as a human, right? Okay, so what I mean to say with that is that there's a whole landscape of new things that are happening on the internet, and so it's unclear what things are going to be important or which ones are not, right? I think that when you build a public permissionless network, what you see are the spectrum of everything that could possibly happen. So people talk a lot about, Solana is like this, like it's only focused on memes.
The centralized casino.
Yeah, there's everything. There's that maybe, but there's also plenty of other things happening too, and
Yeah,
you
have
need to have
BlackRock
both.
launching RWAs there. Yeah.
Exactly, and there's plenty of stuff on RWAs, and you have the entire spectrum of all possible things that you could do on the internet, right? Because guess what? Like the internet, that is what a blockchain should be able to embody. The internet is very good at transmitting data. It's very bad at transmitting value, and value comes with ownership. And so both of those things, that's what Solana provides. A lot of people try and come in on the other side. They say like, look, we're going to build this permission chain and do all this, stuff that everyone likes, everyone's KYC'd, and then eventually people will want to use it for other things. Like, no, this is like not how it works, right? So we have to go, I think, we have to hit it from both sides, and we have to just foster an ecosystem where anybody that feels like they want to do something, it's a censorship-resistant network, they should be able to build what they want to build. And if meme coins are a thing that engage people, and that maybe is a way for capital formation to happen in some future, sure, absolutely. Why not? Like, why should the chain have a choice or even like an opinion on that, right? So at the foundation, really, it's about understanding the different things that are happening, what pieces that we play a role in or don't. And to be honest, like if we had any role to play in meme coins, we'd be really bad at it, right? We're just not that funny. We're not that like cool, right? But the fact that anybody around the world can do that is really important.
And yeah, you're never gonna come up like you and a group of like executives are never gonna come up with a better meme than some random kid in their basement.
Yeah, and nor would we want to. That's not the point. Right?
Exactly.
The point of blockchains is the permissionless ones is that anybody can do whatever they want with it
and can express themselves through it.
Yes.
What about the other part of the equation, though? What about the role Solana itself plays in things breaking out into retail, into non-Web3 audiences?
Yeah, this one's something that we have to spend a lot more time doing. I think the people that are so-called in the trenches, they are figuring their own things out. They have their own vested interest in learning how things work, and they're fine with the status quo, right? Institutions, companies, retail, as it were, they're far away from fundamentally understanding all these things. For some folks, though, they won't need to. Like, I don't think we need the long tail of people to understand fundamentally that what a seed phrase is. They need to have the choice and the option to have that seed phrase and the optionality to always self-custody assets. That's critical, right? But I think that it's too dangerous of a construct in the short term to just dump on somebody, right? If the first thing you do when you onboard onto an application is like, remember these 12 words, like otherwise you'll lose everything. Like in any other world, we would never do this. Right?
Yeah, and hide them somewhere and write them down. Don't keep them
Don't put
online.
it on the internet. It's like, well, I'm on the internet right now. And all of these things just are incongruent, I think, with how people think about things. People think about things in terms of, I have a problem and I need to solve it, right? And if that problem is I need to send money from here to, I don't know, Singapore, or sorry, that's a better example in the United States, from here to London, like, and I don't want to have to pay exorbitant fees, here's how you can do it. That's a solution to a problem, right? So when we think about that, we have to think about, okay, where are the distribution points for these kinds of applications that ultimately the more and more people will benefit from? Right now, I think it's on the enterprise side, where we have teams that have consumer applications, that have a lot of distribution, that can ultimately replace their entire backend with stablecoins and crypto. And that part, I think, ultimately is going to be way more accessible for the vast majority of people, right? Because again, it's really about understanding where's the pain point, and if it's fees or something like that, that means that there's way more competition on building great applications and way more opportunities and options for people to be able to send money around the world, right? And I think that's the first level. The second level is then now when you think about, okay, cool, I've gotten this stablecoin, what do I do with it, right? Then we can think about ownership, right? And we can think about assets. This is where, real world assets have its own spectrum of BlackRock and like money market type things, all the way through to what does it take to really just form capital around a business, right? what does it look like if this podcast studio, every time that you did a podcast, gave a little bit of equity to everyone that was in it? What are we going to do? We're going to be like, dude, come use this podcast. Like, this was a great experience, and you get connected in a much better way. And so there's all of these things where now that's a token. That token floats, and now you have an opportunity for the community around you to invest in the success of this particular platform, right? And so now they can benefit from that as well in the long run. And you can start doing a lot of things which are basically impossible to do at least in the United States, where it's expensive to go public. It's expensive to deal with all of the regulation and all that. We're still dealing with the regulation, to be clear, but it's streamlined because you're embedding it into the actual token itself, something like that. And so now when you think about the economy, the ownership economy, and all the constructs that come with that, especially in the internet age, now you get to that the lowest, most accessible version of a thing. And that's a fundamentally new set of products and new set of companies that do not exist today. And that's the thing that I think would be really, really cool that we could build. And that's where I see retail being able to have access to investment opportunities within their community, right? Or basically anywhere around the world, if they so choose. And I think that's a unique opportunity for their money to do a little bit more than just sit there and get, deal with inflation, whatever it is, right? So I think that's the long tail of really cool products that we haven't seen today, but small, medium-sized businesses can really benefit from thinking about these things.
I think so too. And actually, the talk that I'm going to be doing all over this town over the next couple of days, it's basically based on that. So my thesis, or the point that I want to drive across, is that, of course, blockchains were invented to make the permissionless possible. And even Bitcoin itself is the tokenization of value. So tokenization is very important as a concept to create economies that are permissionless. And it's just the transmission of value, right? So that builds an economy. And now that we have RWAs, we are basically poised to have a universal economy where stuff like what you mentioned, like tokenized studio time for a podcast that you receive in exchange for having spent your time here, that can move within the same economy as the US dollar, as NVIDIA stock, as a tokenized tree, whatever. All of that exists in a single digital economy. So when people look at the RWA field right now, I feel like a lot of them think of it as it's basically a mega fonts and mega corps game. And I think that's a part of it. These, just like in our current economy, these funds and these corporations are playing their game. We are going to be playing our game as the Web3 industry, building applications like this or building the infrastructure that facilitates them. But I think it's foolish to think of these things as just, a big fish game, because honestly, the small entrepreneur, the small creator is going to have a lot more of an input in what the bleeding edge is than these funds can intrinsically have. So if you're in Web3, you should be excited about that.
Totally. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that the blockchain does provide that opportunity to disintermediate the existing incumbents that are trying to make as much money as they can off of the fact that they exist already. Now, it doesn't mean that those companies should not exist or that we shouldn't help them use blockchain. Like, we want a world where all of these things fit. But again, it's that optionality. It's the optionality to have self-custody. It's the optionality that if I need to send you something directly, that I can, right? And today that's not possible because you get stuck in platforms and each platform doesn't connect to the other. And I think that's the place where we want to kind of flip the script again and really make individuals the owners of their own assets, their own content, whatever it is that's digital, they can own all of that.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, it's good to hear you talking about these things, because I feel like these are the points that no one's talking about. And honestly, that's the most exciting thing ever. Like, ever since the Ethereum white paper, like, we've been talking about tokenization. And now that we're so close to it, no one's fucking talking about it. So it's just extremely weird. Let me see how we're doing on time. Yeah, we have to pick up on the RWA side. So just from your opinion, coming from the Solana Foundation, how do you see the state of the field besides everything we just talked about? Like, what are you excited about? What do you see winning in the shorter and longer term?
Yeah, I have a couple of ways to answer that. So I would say that, I've been at the Solana Foundation for about 3 years now. And at the beginning, we were not part of any institutional conversation at all. Like, people would laugh. Like, I legitimately remember being in these meetings where people would kind of like laugh and make jokes about it. And
Such as whom?
no, I mean, just like at these institutional events,
Oh.
we would, I would be the Solana representative, and like people just wouldn't, they wouldn't take it seriously, right? Everything shifted maybe about a year ago, in part due to better representation. I would say people who were focused on understanding the institutional use case, I think, was really important. But you combine that with a lot of success in stablecoins, in RWAs, most recently with things like stocks, right, on chain. We're seeing that something like $700 million worth of transfer volume that basically is by and far number one across all the chains. That's the kind of like innovation that we see. And now Solana's too good to ignore. That's a great place to be in, but we're still not anywhere close to success. So I would say that, there's a few things here. One is understanding what kinds of assets actually make sense to tokenize is one key one. A lot of people think that just by the act of tokenizing something, that suddenly it's a magical thing. It's like, no, it doesn't mean that you can just like skirt the rules, right? It doesn't mean that you can just find a market that didn't exist, right? But it does allow you to start doing interesting things like composing different assets together. You can imagine, different distribution mechanics. I'll give you one concrete example. Teams like a Franklin Templeton might be giving out dividends, and even on on their current platform or even on other chains, they have to limit their distributions because it's too expensive to distribute funds. Well, enter Solana, and suddenly you can have daily dividends on things, right? And how does that change the kinds of things that you're building? How does the fact that you have all this money on chain allow you to do things like buy now, pay never, kind of like things, because you're collateralizing assets and using yield as a way to generate income that ultimately pays off a balance. Those are the kinds of like really cool things. It's not RWA specific, but it's like sort of the ecosystem of things that are happening in RWAs on Solana. And I think that when we present this to institutional folks, they're generally pleasantly surprised, which is great. And what we try and like push them to do is to think a little bit harder about what things that they're building, right?
But you kind of have to think about the solution to their problems and present to them, right? Because it's just like this icon right here to make a call. Like, a lot of people that are born today have never seen a phone that you have to hold like this or like this. So I reckon it's the same to them. Like, they've never been able to think in terms of like daily dividends that can be issued just like by the block, by the second.
Yeah. I think part of it is, we do have to spend a lot of time digging in. And the analogy that I tend to use is, there was a world where everyone and their mother knew how to take care of and feed horses. That's how you got around. Everyone had their own horse. That's how you got everywhere, right? And so that's how I see the sort of like financial infrastructure of today, including some blockchains are really this like the care and feeding of horses, where great, lots of experts, ton of infrastructure works really well. And then you show someone a car and they're like, okay, why would I use this? It's too rocky. It's like, okay, well, how do you get from here to there more quickly? Well, now you build roads, you build infrastructure, but when you build that, then ultimately this car is going to beat that horse every single time, right? And so when we think about, that mindset shift, yes, there are prerequisites that need to be complete before everything connects. But when it does, it's just a fundamentally different view on the world. And so, for these institutional folks, we do spend a lot of time working with them and understanding their product, again, because we don't want people to do things just because it's blockchain.
Yeah.
Right? Like I've seen too many teams issue like a tokenized asset and there's 3 holders. I'm like, guys, you spent 20 people's time for months building this thing and 3 people holding it. What are we doing here? Right? So trying to make sure that they understand like, hey, here's the long tail of things that you can do, both for first-party holders of these assets, but also how you participate in the broader DeFi ecosystem and what value that provides to your product and your business.
And honestly, one thing that you touched on that I didn't think of yet, but it makes a lot of sense, is that obviously this tokenization needs to happen in stages. Like there are things that are not worth tokenizing right now that will make sense to have tokenized eventually, but just like we're starting with stable coins, there's a lot more things that are due to their stage, but it's not up just time for about anything. Timing is quite weird in crypto like that because you have like all sorts of projects. You've been here for a while, so you remember ICO era, like tokenized dentist time, and like we reward you for going to the veterinary or whatever. Yeah. Now, eventually it could make sense, but obviously like early Ethereum days, it doesn't make sense to have stuff like that. And So yeah, if you wanted to say what the roadmap is for that kind of thing, well, how would you put it off the top of your head?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it depends on the time scale of the kinds of assets that are being put on chain and what they're ultimately supposed to do. I still think, I still believe that in the longest possible timeline that everything's going to come on chain.
Oh, right? For sure.
Yeah. But I think that in the short term, for people to find success, you want things that change hands frequently. You want things that have, again, that step change impact of, hey, this thing used to pay out dividends every 3 to 6 months, and now it can get paid out every 3 to 6 days. How do you use the fact that the cost of financial infrastructure is basically zero, and how does that change the product that you're building? So, I think there are plenty of things that fit that bill that we want people to put on chain. There's plenty of things where we want folks to explore. One great example is like time.fun, which is your tokenized dentist time, but it's basically, it makes sense is, look, there are people that have a finite amount of time. Sorry, everyone has a finite amount of time. There are some, oh no. And there are some people that are very willing to part with that time, but don't have a great way to discriminate between different sort of needs for that time. Mm-hmm. And so by creating a market around it, they can at least provide one dimension of access to that time that is based on money or based on their tokens. And guess what? If you think that someone is someone that has valuable time, that maybe that's a thing that you would want to own more of, right? So and all of those proceeds ultimately you can redirect anywhere. Time.fun lets you put it into charities and stuff like that. The point though is that it allows you to differentiate between different uses of time. I mean, how many times have you gotten booked for a lunch meeting? I'm like, look, man, sure, but
it's not worth it.
Yeah, it's like I would happily do this if I could surge. There's a surge charge of 2x because it's during my lunchtime, or there are 10 people that need to talk to me during this time, right?
Or if I could teleport there because there's also the time of commuting and going there and greeting everyone. Yeah,
there's a whole host of these things that again, I think having more transparent markets would be valuable to have,
and efficient as well.
Efficient, yeah.
Are you aware of sweat economy?
Generally as a term, but I don't know if you're referencing something specific.
Oh, no, the crypto project. Mm-mm. So basically, I think it's the only app that people actually use on Near. Don't quote me on that.
Oh, yes, I think I know what you're talking about.
I talked to their founder once, and he made a great case of why they're tokenizing effort or giving... The thing is it's pay to... it's walk to earn, they call it. So I'm not very much of a fan of that to earn concept. But... in their case, it was pretty cool, and the case he was making was quite philosophically interesting. That he said, you're spending your time in walking, you're spending your energy. Energy is quantifiably worth money because we pay for it, and there are markets for it. So, I'm not shilling sweat economy here. I'm just making a point that once you introduce tokenized things into efficient markets, there's quite a lot of interesting things that can have value. To my previous point, once we're tokenizing this, once we have a universal economy on the blockchain, on Solana, or on all blockchains combined through chain abstraction, then you can see these things interacting with each other, and that'd be really, really interesting. Do you think Solana has a specific edge when it comes to all of these markets, besides your efficiency and all the things that we have mentioned already in this conversation?
Yeah, I think technology is ultimately second to community and ecosystem, right? I can give you the fastest blockchain in the world, but if no one uses it, it doesn't matter. Blockchain is a multiplayer game, and ultimately, as a founder, you want to be entering an ecosystem that is filled with people that make you better and help complement the product that you're building, right? So, if you're making that decision, you want to be in the place where you have the best founders and you have the best products. Today, that's Solana for a lot of reasons. I think in part because of the history of Solana, the ups, the downs, and sort of if you were someone who were like that stuck through all of that, then and you built a successful business in spite of all of those things, then you're a fantastic founder and someone that other people will want to be near and work with, right? That's the edge. And it's some people think that all of this stuff is just technology. It's definitely not. It's about people and how they ultimately use the technology.
This reminds me, like, I mean, you mentioned before, obviously you personally are based in New York City, and you get to meet a lot of like fintech people because they live there, they're right next to you. You might be working in the same district, whatever. Do you think Solana has an edge when it comes to quote unquote BD, when it comes to building their ecosystem due to the way it's managed?
Yeah, I would say that the edge, I'm going to come back to the same thing. It's about the people, the amount of people that we talk to at fintechs, at institutional teams or whatever it is, where they know Solana not because they built it, but because they built on it, but because they've used it before. And I think that's a fundamentally important difference where obviously it's great that they get to build on it for the first time, but I think what they see is, hey, I've been using products. I see why this is different. I haven't used products in other ecosystems, and this is why I want to build here, is the best sort of evaluation of, what kinds of things that they can do. Again, because they're working not towards the like, oh, I want to be like this influencer in this ecosystem. It's they want to build a great product and business. And I think that's the coolest thing that I see, especially in New York and meeting people in person. There's certainly that. Certainly the economics help out a lot too. Again, facilitating a globally available protocol at, again, like 0.001 cents and working at the speed of light is something that basically no other blockchain can talk about. And I think that's also critical for people understanding, hey, you're in an ecosystem that has great founders and great businesses, and the technology is proven, right? It's battle tested and it's been around for a long time and it's worked under stress. That last piece is really critical. I make a reference a lot to different items and how they're designed, right? So we take, some of these planters, they're made of ceramic, and if they get dropped, they break. But they're pretty sturdy otherwise. If they just sit there, they can hold water and soil and stuff like that. And that's what a lot of blockchains are. They're great. They work really well for their intended purpose, but when they get dropped, they break. Solana is a technology and an ecosystem that wants to be dropped. They want to get dropped, to break, to get built up, to get stronger again, and have that happen over and over and over again. And that's just something you do not see in any other ecosystem because they're resistant to the idea that things should break. Things should break. You should break in the same way that you break your muscle fibers in order to get stronger, right? So that's, to me, the difference. And we have an ecosystem of founders that knows how to deal with that process.
That's quite a cool way of looking at things. Like, I have been a very strong critic of the trade-offs and the decentralization trade-offs particularly. And I have never seen it explained like that. So to give you credit, I think it's a lot more likely if I think on these terms, like if I ever hear like, oh, Solana halted, Solana, something happened, I am more likely to think that it will bounce back because of the previous experiences than I would, for example, for Ethereum, yes, which I'm a big fan of. So yeah, that's a very great point. Like sometimes you do want things to break for them to be able to bounce back and for you to be able to test them. Because obviously they say move fast and break things, and you guys move fast. So.
Yeah, and this is more of an engineering specific adage, but you can never guarantee the absence of a bug. It's impossible to do that. And so the best way to do it is to stress test it in every single possible way to eliminate as many obvious bugs as possible. So yes, maybe Solana goes down, but it doesn't go down for the same reason more than once. Great, you learn something, you bring it back up, and you reset expectations with everyone, and great, because guess what? We're very early, right? And building any fundamentally new piece of technology takes time. and it takes a lot of effort, and it means that not everything's going to work the first time. If it did, something would be wrong. If you ask any engineer that's building any code, if it works the first time, something's wrong. So
yeah,
because
true.
you just don't know if
You just didn't test it properly, most likely.
Exactly. So yeah, I'm an engineer. I take an engineer's hat on these kinds of things, and yeah, like Solana is processing something on the order of like 100 million transactions per day. That's more than all major blockchains combined, right? So when people think about like, hey, can you compare this to another chain? I'm like, look, it's not a comparison. They're not even in the same. They can't even process that many things. Right. And again, that the ability of what the network can process, TPS, whatever it is always a function of demand, not supply. So there's plenty of supply out there. Why we need more demand, and so far no one's giving it to us. So I think there's a whole bunch of things here where I firmly believe that the mindset of looking for things to stress, looking for those things that will break it will ultimately be important, because guess what? If we are successful in everything that we do and the entire world's global financial infrastructure is built on chain, on Solana, it needs to be damn good, right?
I totally believe you're right there. Since we need to start getting closer to wrapping up, what are you excited about that's in the pipeline when it comes to RWAs and otherwise?
Yeah, I think, like I said, every enterprise in the world is thinking about or probably should be thinking about what at least stablecoins looks like. So we're seeing that with policy shifts in the United States. That is setting the stage for other countries to also evaluate their own blockchain-related policies, especially here in Korea, in places like Vietnam. So we're seeing different countries understand how it may impact their different systems. And unlike the United States, these other countries tend to have different financial infrastructure that maybe you only need to change a couple of things in order to really fundamentally change how the entire system works, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's very promising. I think financial institutions are also sort of understanding what the value of blockchain is. So we have teams like Bullish that are like, they're basically replacing their backend with stablecoins on Solana. Great, right? We're going to start to see people explore different things. The thing that I'm thinking about is like, what does it look like if we are successful and we need to take an entire country and say, hey, this country needs blockchain everywhere in the ways that matter. What does that even mean? I don't know. Like, has anyone thought about this? Has anyone written this document that's like, here's what, sure, a sort of fictional country that does not exist and they make out of thin air might work this way. But what does that look like when, practically speaking, you have to replace it? And we've seen some countries experiment on different things and they haven't been successful. But they also haven't seen Solana the way it is today. So that's another area that I think is worth really expanding on. And look, if you don't make it all the way, but you make it 75%, still really good.
Still pretty good. And obviously the real use cases are better than the imaginary ones. I'm a notorious Cardano disrespecter. So obviously when you're actually building for the real use cases in the real time, it's very clear what you need to do and where you need to start. And I think countries like that, I used to live in Argentina during the latest crash that they had, and it was really interesting seeing how people would turn into stablecoins, because obviously their government was quasi-socialist, so they wanted to have a control on how many dollars the average person could purchase from themselves. They would be the ones selling it to you. So there would be like a government price, a black market price, and people would take crypto, because why wouldn't you take USDT that's not surveilled by the government and be able to store your life savings in a currency that's not crashing 10% a day? So you do see like there are very obvious areas where you need to apply things. Vietnam, as you mentioned, is a very good example for things like how their financial infrastructure looks like. And to end in a note that I figured I would want to ask you to finally get a clear answer on this. Do you see anything in crypto AI that is notoriously good right now? Do you see any? Because right now, my personal perspective, now I'm just not talking as Particle, I'm talking as Carlos asking questions. My personal perspective is like, we have AI bots on Twitter that have a meme coin attached to them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of cool. But I haven't, there's like one or two use cases that are related to AI that are interesting right now. And I feel like most of them are related to tokenizing compute. But do you see anything in AI happening in Web3 that you think is interesting at the moment?
Yeah, I think there's three of them. One that you've already talked, which is tokenizing compute, which is roughly like pretty obvious, right, of a product in a business. The second one is around coordination of inference, that sort of stuff. I think is quite interesting as well. We're still sort of jury's still out on whether or not that's going to be successful long term. But I think fundamentally the idea of having a subset of companies in the world control the biases that go into models, foundation models that are being used for everyday life, doesn't feel like the only path that can exist, right?
It's quite dangerous.
Yeah, yeah. And so what does it look like, again, to have decentralized ownership over the creation of those models? How can you contribute to them, et cetera, et cetera? That's still to be found out, but I think is quite compelling. The third one is as a complement to AI agents. So I think we're starting to see the rise of agentic commerce. X402, which was sort of like built by Coinbase, has support for Solana, and that allows APIs to advertise that a payment is needed for the services that are behind the API, which is great. It means that, again, I mentioned this before, the internet's great at data, but not particularly good at value. Blockchains are great for value, and now you can pay specifically to this API. Now, for a human, we're like, why would we do that? We have subscriptions and memberships and all that sort of stuff. But one is that it's really annoying to have to sign up for every service. We all know this is kind of annoying. Second is that you want to be able to pay for variable amounts of compute or whatever it is that you're doing. Third is you want to maybe do that with microtransactions. Now, we've all had this, everyone has always used this kind of like microtransactions, micropayments example in the wilds, pay for every news article you read. People don't do that, right? People aren't, just don't pay that way, but machines might. And so I think this is where we start to see AI and crypto overlapping for the commerce component of it, right? Because AI is a single player game. It's one model that is generating information, but it doesn't work with other things. It doesn't have a value system. Blockchain is the value system for for AI products. So I think in the long term, we'll start to see agents transacting more with services using blockchains.
That's a good answer. I'll look more into agents. And man, pleasure having you on the podcast. It's been
Likewise.
A really good conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Do you have anything that you wanted to bring up that we didn't touch on?
I think the main thing is the Solana Seeker's out. So if you haven't seen this before, it's a custom phone built by the Solana mobile team, has Seed Vault access, and
can I see that?
a lot of cool things. Yeah. And what's really cool about it is it's an exploration on what it looks like to have crypto hardware be embedded as deep as your phone. Every single phone that exists has a special area in it that allows for private and encrypted information to pass, but so far none of them expose the API that's needed for signing transactions. That's what the Seeker and before it the Saga were built to sort of exemplify. And I think it's really important to understand that, look, every single person in the world is likely to have their first crypto transaction happen on a phone. And I think that, it's a good example. I don't know that everyone in the world's going to have a Seeker, but I think they'll have a Samsung, right? Or an iPhone or something like that. And they should have the ability to self-custody their assets and be able to send things if they so choose, right? So I think Solana Mobile is a really great example of the kinds of innovation that we want to see, of pushing the boundaries of where we look at the product landscape. And look, the vast majority of people don't have PCs, nor are they going to use browser extensions. That alone is a deal breaker. So I think it's a good example of what we see is going to come next in this sort of product landscape.
Totally. And I'm glad you guys are pushing those boundaries because, like stuff like you mentioned, signatures is wild how we haven't fully gotten those as good as they should be for, everyone always says their grandmother, but for their grandmother to be able to use that kind of thing.
Totally.
Hopefully, and also, that's a very good point. Like most people here in the world don't know how to install a browser extension. Most people are not going to have a PC as we get older and our habits die off. So it needs to happen right here.
Yes, the future is mobile.
The future is mobile. And with that, we can conclude the conversation. Thank you so much, brother.
Thank you.
And we'll catch you on the next episode. This will be the first one of this series, Real World Value, recorded in person. We've been doing it on Twitter, but now it's way better. So thank you so much for listening in, and thank you, Jon.
Thank you.